welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. So for the past year or so, I have been making hard cheeses out of our goat's milk. I know I have not featured that very much on the channel. That is going to change this year. Currently, we're waiting on a couple of our high capacity milking does to give birth. No signs of babies quite yet, but my mind is working and preparing for not only kidding season, but cheese season. So when you start making your own cheeses at home, stuff doesn't go right all of the time. You get some cheeses that are just kind of blah, and it's hard to go through them, to be honest. They're not your most favorite thing. One of the cheeses that we buy a lot at the store still, even though I have been making our own cheeses, is Velveeta. Because that's one of the tricky things with making your own cheeses, is finding a cheese that melts really well, really reliably. So I've got this box of Velveeta here, and you can probably see the ingredients list. It's quite long. It's not exactly great for you. A lot of people shy away from like American cheeses because they're processed, and while that is true with a lot of store-bought products, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make a nice melty cheese that is very similar to this product right here that really does not have that many ingredients. In fact, the main ingredient can be homemade cheeses. So I want to get this out there out front that you don't have to make your own homemade cheeses in order to create a similar product. You can absolutely do the same thing with store-bought hard cheeses. This here is a Monterey Jack that I made. I think the date on it said June. It's just kind of hard, and it's not really what we like in like a slicing type cheese. It crumbles apart, and so I gave it a little bit of a rinse. It's not really necessary, but this cheese kind of needed it. And we're going to turn it into something that we can melt and have with chips. So there's only a few ingredients that are needed. It's your cheese. We need about 400 grams of it. I am going to double the recipe, so I'm going to go for 800 grams. We're going to need water, and you also need this sodium citrate. You can make your own sodium citrate by putting together, I think it's baking soda and citric acid and water and boiling it down until the water has evaporated, or you could buy it. Buying it was easier for me this time. And what does this do? Why do we need this in order to make the cheese? This is an emulsifier. What that's going to do is allow the oils and like the fats that are in the cheese, or the proteins in the cheese that normally will kind of separate in a non-melting cheese. It allows those to hold together and not separate and make a melting cheese out of a cheese that ordinarily would not melt on its own. So let's see what we've got here. How much weight? I've got a kilo of cheese here, which is a little bit more than I need, but we're gonna roll with it. Now what we're going to do so that the sodium citrate can come in contact with more surfaces of the cheese is shred this up. You could use a food processor. Here's the inside of this cheese. It smells lovely. Let's give this a taste as is. Very good, but it does have a dry mouthfeel, which my kids do not love, and we have 4 children. Most of what we do here is for them, and we want them to eat this. They're not gonna eat it like this, although I really like it. It's very good in flavor. The texture's just off. Yesterday was leg day, basically. I was hauling around hundreds of pounds of hay and feed bags and stuff all over the farm through the mud. Today's arm day. The original recipe for this, I think, was done by Gavin Weber. I have seen it through the Jennifer Murch cheese making channel. I will link both of those channels and their related videos in the description box below, but it's very simple. So I have a cup of water. It's a little bit more than a cup actually, because I have a little bit more than the 800 grams of cheese. But if you're doing the original recipe, it's 400 grams of your shredded cheese and half a cup water. The original recipe calls for 15 grams of sodium citrate added to the water. I've got a little bit more than 30 grams here. I'm going to turn the burner to medium, and we want this to dissolve. All right, so I'm moving my spatula around in the pot, and I no longer hear like the grittiness of the sodium citrate. So I'm going to add in my cheese. So I've still got the burner on a medium heat. I may need to turn it down to low because I don't want to really cook the cheese. I just want it to melt. I was told that at this point we can add some Annatto Cheese Coloring if we want a yellow color, and I do. Whenever I make cheese, my kids ask me if I'm making the white kind or the yellow kind. Often I make Colby, no matter what. Sometimes I add the Annatto and sometimes I don't. They eat it better when it's yellow. Kids. It's just a few drops. A little goes a really long way with this stuff. This is taking quite a while for all of the little bits of Monterey Jack to melt down and incorporate. So I still have a few little lumps in here. It is coming together though. I have been stirring pretty constantly for about 25 minutes and probably have another 10 or so minutes to go. This may have taken a little bit less time had I pulsed the shredded cheese in my food processor to make the initial particles that we started out with a little bit smaller. That just would have sped things up a little. So, pro tip? I'm not a pro, it's just a tip. I am noticing that there's like a greasiness on my spatula and the cheese has started to dry out a little bit. So what I am going to do is add in a little bit more water and sodium citrate mixture and see if we can kind of recover this. It's not bad though. We just still have a few lumps, and the greasiness is what you're trying to avoid when you're making a cheese like this. And that's what the sodium citrate is for. So let's add a little more. It's probably a teaspoon of the sodium citrate, and I do want it to dissolve, so I'm just gonna stand here and swirl it for a little bit. I did remove this from the heat. Okay, so I am done mixing. I've been mixing for an hour now, and some of the little lumps are still in there. I am going to guess that it is because it is from my homemade cheese, and I am still a relatively inexperienced cheese maker. So your cheese will probably turn out much smoother, and a different type of cheese, like one of my Colbys, might also turn out better than this Monterey Jack did. See, there's like little tiny bits in there. This pot is very hot, but my goal is to then mold this cheese in this silicone bread pan that I have down here. Oh, it's already starting to basically set up. Wow. We've got our log of cheese and it is already starting to set up, but what I need to do now is just set this in the refrigerator and let it chill all the way through, and then we can see how it slices. If you happen to make a small batch of this, or even a large one, if your plan was to make like a giant vat of macaroni and cheese or something, you could absolutely add your boiled noodles to the cheese as is and not have to mold it and then remelt it later. But we made such a big block, I know I'm not gonna be able to use all of this at once, so we're just gonna chill the whole thing. So this is what we've got. Now it only chilled in the fridge for a couple hours. I do want to use this with dinner tonight, but it's set up pretty well. It'll probably set up more firm when I leave it in the fridge overnight, but let's cut into it. I'll probably use about half with dinner, so we'll go right down the middle and cut it open. A little bit of it stuck to the knife, which I did expect because, as I said, it has not chilled fully. This is what it looks like on the inside. You can see a little bit of the original cheese. The little crumblies are in there. Let's give it a taste. That is so good. It tastes a lot like the original cheese that we made this with, but you know, it's not exact. It is a little bit more muted, which I think our kids will appreciate. That cheese had been in our cheese fridge for probably about 7 months, and in that time it did get quite sharp, which I enjoy, but they don't always like. But they're really gonna like this. I'm gonna leave this half in the refrigerator so it can solidify some more overnight, and then we'll see how we can slice it with like the cheese slicer. So in the pot here, I've got some ground pork. This is from our Cooney pigs. I have some roasted salsa from 2022 that we need to go through. This is all stuff from our garden. Splash of milk from our goats. spilled it all over the floor trying to show it. That would have been very much like me though.
That's pretty good.
This would be good with pasta.
You think so? Like macaroni and cheese? Yeah. It's definitely one of the uses, and Levi just mentioned broccoli cheddar soup as well. We could do with that. Molly, you like it? Well, the good news is everybody's eating it, and they would not have eaten this cheese in its original form. I need to wait until morning to see if I can slice this a little bit more thinly, but even if I can't, this is a success. I'm going to add this to the list of things that you can make using goat's milk. It's one of those really common misconceptions that you can't do a whole lot with goat's milk. You can do so much with goat's milk, especially if you have a cream separator. I have an entire playlist of all the things that we have made using our goat's milk. It is not a comprehensive list. So go ahead and give that a click, and I'll see you again soon.